All right, everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's episode, we look at the Leafs versus Panthers Round 2 series.
Round 2, I can't believe we're sitting here.
Those words have not been minced together in 19 years.
Yeah.
As a Leafs fan, how are we feeling?
It feels good, like especially this morning. We're recording this on Monday, and we would have been scheduled for a Game 7, right. And man, does it feel good to not have to worry about that. Like, it was getting to be too much, but it feels great because it's like the first series win that I've been old enough to relish. I was only like 6 years old the last time they did and didn't really think about it much then, but man, it feels great.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. That's a big drought to get over. Obviously, the city of Toronto was just in an electric state on Saturday night as well. But now they face a Panthers team, and honestly, like, things kind of have opened up for the Leafs in a way. Obviously, with Boston losing that first round to Florida, obviously a little bit of a better opponent, although I don't think, obviously, Florida is a team to take lightly. They drive a lot of offense. Bobrovsky looks like he's starting to play a little bit better, and they have decent depth, especially on that defensive side. So yeah. How did you think of the Leafs' overall performance in that Lightning series? I think out of the first like 5 games, like, they outshot the Lightning a couple of the games, and I thought they outplayed them.
Yeah.
But then they had those comebacks, and it seemed like that kind of went away like later on in the series.
Yeah, I think something to do with it would be Tampa's game plan, and I think that was more targeting the guys like aren't very good at moving the puck, like Justin Holl, for example. I think you saw it with the numbers. Like, Justin Holl was on for about 75% of the Lightning goals. I think it was something crazy like that. And I think it was just the Leafs' inability to break out the puck. And it does concern me a little bit going against Florida because, as we saw against the Bruins, their forecheck was really good. Like, they're bats out of hell every single game. But I think with the lineup changes and getting Liljegren in there, I'm feeling a bit better about it. Having more puck-moving guys, it's kind of the trade-off that we saw Kyle Dubas do, because before, the Leafs' philosophy was always puck movers, skill guys, like having all these possession players. But at the deadline, they went out and made the changes, bringing in McCabe and Shen. Yeah. Shen has actually been a great defenseman, like, especially with moving the puck shockingly. I think he's leading defenseman in expected goals for percentage.
The Leafs,
yeah.
That's it, especially with Riley scoring. Does he have 2 goals or 1?
Riley had 4.
4 goals?
3 or 4, yeah.
Shit.
I think he scored in like 3 or 4 straight.
That's crazy.
But, it's a scary one for sure. Like, you'd think that I'd be over the moon that we don't have to play the Bruins, but it's hard to say because 2 teams are coming off huge momentum swings. I must say, though, that the Panthers could have kind of gave it their all against this Bruins team. Like, they did look pretty tired in the final bits of that Bruins Game 7. They did come out hotter in overtime, but it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, that's a good thing to note too. Like, coming off 3 big wins, 2 of them in overtime. Yeah. The other one was like a 7-5 game. So obviously a lot of energy put out there. But looking at just some of the numbers, and I don't want to read into these too much because I do think there were a couple games where Toronto just from the get-go, Game 1 is an example, from the get-go, just we're done in that sense. And I think obviously that hurts a little bit some of your numbers, but looking at some of their expected stats, they were out of the 16 teams in the first round in 5-on-5. They're 12th in expected goals for, 15th in Corsi for, 6th in expected goals against, which is good going up against a team like Florida, 15th in shots, 12th in high danger chances for, and then 14th in high danger save percentage, while the the Panthers were pretty much better in every category other than expected goals against. Does that concern you at all going into this series?
No, because I think what we've seen before, looking at this Leafs team last year, outplayed Tampa at 5-on-5 and lost. And I think one of the biggest things for this Leafs team is overcoming that hump and just not quitting, right? Those gutsy wins paint a bigger picture to me than 5-on-5 possession stats, because yes, there was some comeback wins, but if you're ahead in the series, the team's going to be hungrier, that's down, and they're going to be outplaying them, which is kind of what we saw last year. So I'm not too concerned about it. It's also not a massive sample size. It's 6 games at the end of the day. Take everything with a grain of salt, but it's not a huge point of concern for me. Obviously, I'd want to see those much higher. But again, it could end up meaning nothing if you look at this Devils team that's going to play their Game 7 tonight. Yeah. They're second among all playoff teams right now in expected goals for, and they could be out in the first round. So I guess we'll see, but I'm not too concerned about that.
Yeah, and then kind of leads into the next thing too. For one, so the series price, Leafs -165 on DraftKings. And all the odds we're going to be talking about in this game or in this show are from DraftKings, and so you haven't signed up there before, the link will be in the description. If you bet $5 on any NHL game or NBA game, you get $150 in bonus bets instantly. A super easy, like low risk welcome offer. But the Leafs minus 165, Panthers plus 145. Panthers plus 1.5 in the series, minus 150. I want to kind of ask you about the goalies, because I think Samsonov had some games where he was a little shaky for sure, but definitely played a lot better in that game 7. And then Bobrovsky in the same kind of light. Like the Panthers outchanced the Bruins in a lot of different games, or a lot of the games, and Bobrovsky let in some soft ones. You saw the same thing with Lyon. So their goals saved above expected going into this series are pretty much like right at the same.
Yeah, they're both like .01. Yeah. I think Bobrovsky's like minus .01 or something, and then Samsonov's
is like
better.
Just above it.
Yeah.
Do you think this will be a tougher series for Bobrovsky in terms of like maybe volume of scoring chances and then maybe also quality of scoring chances, just with the style of attack Toronto has?
I think so, because the main thing I would look at is how Toronto scored a lot of their goals against Tampa. Like, they beat Vasi. Like, yes, a lot of people talked about how he wasn't the same Vasilevsky. Until, like, yes, maybe not up to, like, the same standard as before. Granted, the Tampa teams were also better in the past, but his numbers before were still incredible. But I think in this series, the Leafs have shown that they can get to those dirty areas. They're scoring a lot on screens. So I think the way that they were scoring isn't as much about what goalie they're going against. I guess we'll see. We could get stonewalled by Bobrovsky, but I think it's also a really good thing, too, for Samsonov to have that performance in Game 6, because throughout his career, he has not really had good playoff numbers. He was 1-6 with Washington, went 4-2 now with the Leafs. So I think that Game 6 is a huge confidence builder for them. And you don't really know what you're going to get with Bob, because he's done this before. He's taken down the President's Trophy winner. He took down the Blue Jackets, and then he takes down the Bruins. So it'll be interesting. But like, as a fan, I think beating Vasi would be obviously what seems to be harder than beating Bob, right?
It's only one other team has done it in the last 3 years or whatever, right? Yeah. So I think definitely being Vasilevsky is huge. I do think there's something to be said about him having. It is his worst year statistically from the regular season and playoffs compared to the last 3 or 4 years. But the last 3 or 4 years, he was incredible. It wasn't like he was a bad goalie. He just wasn't great. But looking at maybe some bets for this series, like, would you consider a Leafs minus 1.5? Like, do you see any value? I know it's probably tough for you to say as a Leafs fan, but as the Panthers plus 145 they are, 150, like, is that a terrible bet for non-Leafs fans?
I don't think so. Like, as a Leafs fan, I don't want to be like, yes, Leafs minus 1.5. I might end up betting it, but I don't want to advocate for it. I honestly do think the Panthers are probably sneaky value in this, just if you're looking at advanced metrics. But at the end of the day, like, I do like the Leafs to win the series, but in terms from a value and like numbers perspective, I think the Panthers are a good plus EV bet. Yeah. Especially at that price. Some things I would look at, maybe if you aren't sure about a side, or maybe 6 games. I was talking to you before too about. So the Panthers plus 1.5 is minus 150, I think. Yeah. So if you don't want to pay the juice on that, you can also play the series to go to 7 games at plus 200, or just take the Panthers to win outright. You could split up a unit on each of those bets and probably get better value than Panthers plus 1.5, because you're going to be paying the juice. And for the Panthers to cover that, they're going to have to win the series or go to Game 7. So if you can get 2 other options at plus 200, I think that's just a way better angle.
Yeah, that's a great point. You did bring that up right before the show today, and it's instead of like, if your unit size is $100, or if you play to win a unit, like, putting $150 on that instead of splitting up and putting, like, whatever, to win 50 on the Panthers series, and then to win 50 on to go to Game 7, because it's true. It's especially in this playoffs, not a single team got swept in the first round too. The closest one was 6 games. I think every series went to 6 games at least, right?
Yeah.
Dallas.
Yeah.
New York.
The Jets was 5.
Oh,
right?
Jets. Right? Poverty ass
Jets. Man. It was so fun. A bit off topic. It was so funny after that first Jets game. Everyone's like, "Oh man, I picked the wrong team." Like, everyone was like regretting picking Vegas.
And then they just switched it up, and both teams just switched. Like, Jets started playing horribly, and the Golden Knights started playing well. So I think I'm gonna look at something like that, like a Panthers, because I was originally looking at Panthers plus 1.5, because I just think I just think this is gonna be a really gritty series, and you know you can get 6 games or 7 games at plus 205, like separate bets, but they're at the same price. But in terms of like a player prop, we were talking about how if there's a goal scorer or goal scorer props, like Matthews or Tkachuk is probably like the best bet. They both did it for their teams in the first round. I don't see it changing that too much. Maybe Verhaeghe. I don't know if he just scored. Could have some good momentum. He was never on. Was he drafted by the Leafs, Verhaeghe? No.
Yeah, he was drafted by the Leafs. Then he was traded to Tampa.
Yeah, I think so.
And then,
but you were looking at a point or a prop.
So I don't have the line out for this yet, but if you can get it anywhere, I really like Marner to have the most points in the series. If you are leaning the Leafs, I think this could be a good bet too. He has 11 goals and 22 assists in 23 games against Florida in his career. So pretty solid numbers there. Looking through the Leafs top 6, like Matthews is also a good look, but none of them come really close to Marner. Marner is above a point per game. The other top guns are around point per game. John Tavares could maybe be a good look too, just considering the history. Like when he was on the Islanders, he won them a playoff series in overtime with them. So I think that could be a good look. Also, he will be scoring those like net front goals, which I think Boston was able to capitalize on, especially Bertuzzi. So I think that'll be an area where the series is won, is in front of the net.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. I would look at John Tavares for some props in this one. He looks like a different player right now. I feel like just Ryan O'Reilly and some of the energy on this team is invigorate some of the other players in the top 6.
For sure, especially like those new additions. Like I'm excited to see game 1 just to see if you can notice like that burden kind of lifted off them, because you could see it before. You saw it in game 1. The Leafs kind of scared to make a mistake. Even in game 5 when they had a chance to close out, like they weren't attacking Tampa. They were sitting back and just trying not to lose the game, and that was their issue. So now it's like, are we going to get? We still haven't seen the Leafs play their best hockey yet. Maybe game 2. I think
I would say game 2 they played really well, but I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. So I like that. The Monkeys finally off the back for the Leafs. I'm probably gonna be looking at some sort of 6 games or 7 games, or the Panthers in some capacity because the plus money's nice. Yeah. You'll be looking at the Leafs. I don't know if we're going to see a bet from you, but that's okay. I think the Marner props will keep you entertained throughout it. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure, if you haven't signed up at DraftKings, to check that link out in the description. Bet 5, get $150 bonus bets. Great offer, and we'll see you guys in the next video.